Good morning. This is the Blaine's World podcast that can be heard each week or found each week on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, a couple other places as well. We'll soon be on Spotify and other places like that. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely Fairview, North Carolina. Each week we focus on the positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And to that end, it's my pleasure to introduce two friends of mine, one a longtime friend, and that's Steve Samuels, and the other is John Crutchfield. And Steve already beat me to it by asking to wave to all you fans who are watching this show. But Steve, I should mention, I think this is maybe the record, Steve. This is about is it 43rd or 44th show you've been on one of my shows? Or
Don't
45?
count them, but yes,
Okay.
we are definitely in the multiple dozens.
Okay, you and Rodney Smith are up there in a bunch of people.
We're duking it out
Okay, I've had the
for
pleasure
your
of doing.
attention.
I just interviewed Rodney, by the way, on his show, Three Musketeers. Very
Yeah,
exciting. Have you seen that
yeah,
yet?
yeah.
Three Musketeers? Okay, I'm looking forward to seeing that. But anyway, I should mention that Steve Samuels, producer, director, has a bad habit of this. A bad habit of co-founding theater companies, managed and occasionally acted with New York's ridiculous theatrical company, was senior editor of TCG Books and American Theater Magazine, and served as artistic associate at Arena Stage in Washington. He's founding artistic director of Asheville's Magnetic Theater, where he oversaw 53 world premieres in the course of 8 years, directing more than 2 dozen himself and writing, among others. He also has been an actor in many plays in the area. I've had the pleasure of seeing him in them. And he's returning now for his 8th John Crutchfield play that he's had the privilege of directing. That's some tie-in to the two of you, and we'll ask about that. John Crutchfield, a playwright and performer, has worked for more than 20 years in professional theater in the U.S. and Germany. His plays include The Songs of Robert Ruth, The Labyrinth, Solstice, 12 Treasures, Memory, Landscape with Missing Person. I love the titles, John. The Strange and Tragical Adventures of Pinocchio, Ivory, Come, Think Night, The Jacob Higginbottom Show, Malverse I love, TRNZ I love, My Crazy Love, as well as numerous shorter works. With Steve Samuels, with whom he's collaborated for more than a decade, he co-founded Sublime Theater and Press in 2018. At present, he also teaches German at UNCA and works freelance as a translator. And so the first question I'll throw out to you, John, and maybe I asked you before, but since the first podcast we're doing together, as a kid, did you grow up in Germany as a kid, or where'd you grow up?
No, I did not grow up in Germany. I was actually born in Austin, Texas, but grew up in Boone, North Carolina. My family moved to Boone when I was maybe 6, I think, 7. But my father was in the army in the 50s and was stationed in Germany. And so I heard a lot of his stories about that time in his life when I was growing up. And I definitely think that those stories kind of planted or sent roots down into my imagination from an early age. And so when I had the chance, as soon as I had the chance, I started studying German. That was when I was in college. And yeah, I've lived there off and on for various periods during my life. So it really is a deeply embedded part of my life. But no, I'm not German. I wasn't born there. I am, however, married to a German, and both of our children were born there.
When you were a kid growing up in Boone, did you always know you wanted to be either one of two things, a theatrical guy and or a teacher?
Uh, no and no. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was actually much more interested in visual art when I was a kid. I was an assiduous drawer, painter, tinkerer, though I have discovered as I was going through some boxes at my mother's house that I did apparently like to make little books. I never wrote anything in these little books, but I was making little books, presumably with the intention at some point of writing. But I do know as well that I guess the closest thing would be when I was in about seventh or eighth grade and life started becoming complex for me. I started journaling. I think that was really my first experience trying to articulate my thoughts and maybe discover new thoughts through writing. And that practice of journaling, I would say, really is a very important part of my life today, but it may have been the beginnings of my life as a writer, I would say.
Do you remember your first play you were in?
Oh gosh, the first play I was in, I
I
think,
warned you, John. I
uh,
knew Blaine would ask.
yeah, you did warn me, Steve. I should have thought about this. Well, I have two answers to that. The first play I was actually in, I was in the seventh grade, but I was a musician in the orchestra in a little school play. Um, the next year, though, in the eighth grade, I was in fact in, I guess, two different school plays. My English teacher at Hardin Park Elementary School in Boone, the only public school there in Boone, she was a real drama fan, and she actually went on later to become the drama teacher at the high school. But so she always had us, the eighth grade class did a play. And I can't even remember what role I had in one of the plays, but in the other plays, I played Atticus Finch, I think, or no, I played Jim. I played Jim in To Kill a Mockingbird. Atticus Finch was my friend
Right.
Keith. No, I played Jim.
Well,
That was my first acting experience, probably.
I ask that for a reason, and I don't know if I've shared this idea with you, Steve, but I have this idea I want to do for a local theater company. I want everybody to recreate their first role, you know, because when you did Jim, I assume you folks probably didn't videotape it then, or did they?
No,
But
I know of no record that exists of that
but
of
tell
that
me,
production.
I don't know if you, but for your kids, wouldn't that be too cool if they could see you do, you know, Jim all these years later? Wouldn't that be a fun thing to do? Yeah.
My kids would get a hoot out of that. Yeah,
Right. So you keep that in the back of mind. But everybody, local folks, would do their very first thing they ever did in
yeah,
theater,
right.
and we'll show that going. So Jim was your first role, and then kind of the bug took off from there.
Well, there was a long hiatus. I mean, I didn't really do theater in high school. I was much more interested in visual art, as I said. It really was not until I I made my escape from graduate school at about age 30 that I got seriously interested in theater, and that was because mostly of a friend of mine with whom I'd grown up in Boone. He had become a theater director, and he is now actually the artistic director at the Honolulu Theater for Youth. So he's made a career out of directing. But he persuaded me at some point to give him free reign with a small collection of my poems that I had written in graduate school as part of my Master of Fine Arts degree in poetry. And he made a play out of those, or made a performance out of those poems when we were both in residence at the North Carolina Governor's School. I want to say this was 1998. And those poems, by the way, the title of them in my MFA thesis is The Songs of Robert. So the play that the current project is the, I guess, sequel to, that play actually is rooted in a group of poems that I wrote in my 20s. So a long, long time ago. But that's how I got into theater. It was really because my friend said, "Hey, I want to stage these poems." And I was very skeptical, as any rational person, of course, would be. But then I saw what happened to those poems in the hands of a gifted director and these talented young students. And it was a revelation to me to see what could happen when these words became embodied and choreographed in such a way as to be experienceable by an audience. And so I was sitting in the audience, you know, and feeling people feel the words in a way I had never experienced before. And so that really opened my eyes to what could be possible in theater.
And that's where we sort of have Steve come in, and we'll bring him in a
Yes.
second. But Steve now is the guy, you know, putting on, you know, a lot of your stuff. But one other question, if I can, John, in terms of all the things you've done, in terms of writing, performing, do you have a preference as to what you like best?
Um, that's a tough question. I would say that as far as directing, my affections do not that way tend. I like directing, but I don't have the experience to really be good at it yet. I've tried my hand at it, and I enjoy, and I always learn a tremendous amount from directing. But I have to be realistic in terms of my skills at this point. So, so I've directed my own work on occasion, which of course has its dangers as well. I would say really that writing is where my heart is as far as this art form, but I do love acting as well if it is a text that I can connect to. I could never be a professional actor because I really just there's an internal resistance to working on shows that I don't feel connected to. And that's a limitation, of course, for me. So if I feel connected to the material, then I can really enjoy acting. And one of my most profound experiences as an actor was actually in a play that Steve wrote. This was one of the inaugural productions we did back in the day, at the Magnetic Theater. It was Steve's play When Jekyll Met Hyde. And
Okay.
that was just an amazing script and an amazing project, and I loved it. So yeah, based on that, I would say, oh, I'm an actor through and through. But but no, that was a very unique experience, and I wouldn't say that my heart could possibly be in every acting project that someone would possibly offer me.
By the way, one of the things I used to love about teaching was I got to act as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
It's your
you're right.
stage, and you're trying
Teaching is
to,
a very performative craft.
for
Absolutely.
sure.
Yeah.
And Steve, before we get into your background, let me just ask the thing I've been wondering about today, and that is that you and John have this somehow amazing collaboration together for like 10 years.
13, but who's counting?
Exactly. First of all, how did you first meet each other? And then talk about the collaboration, if you would, Steve.
Well, we actually met 2008 because of the Songs of Robert, which John was performing at NC Stage as a solo show for the first time, if I'm the first solo outing of Robert. Robert originally, as John was describing, was a performed with many, and at a certain point it became a two performer show, and then it was a solo show, and I saw that, and it impressed, intrigued, and we went out for drinks afterwards, and started talking, and John had already planned to take that show to the New York International Fringe Festival in 2009, and we decided to work together on a new version of it. I went back through all of the versions, including his MFA thesis, a book of poems, and changed some things around and reoriented the way it was performed a little bit. That's how we started the Magnetic way back when, and it was an extraordinary thing. We did it first at the BB, which is where we will be soon with the sequel, Robert Returns, starting September 15th. And we took it to the New York International Fringe Festival, where we came home with an outstanding performance award, which was wonderful and encouraging, to say the least. We produced it multiple times here in Asheville after that because it was really popular. And yeah, that was the beginning of a wonderful friendship and collaboration, which, as all things do, we've had our ups, we've had our downs, but it's really settled over the years into something truly extraordinary for me. I'm sure for John as well. I mean, we know each other very well. We speak enough of a common language that it's just kind of a profound pleasure now to work together. It's
Now,
really very special.
do you also work with John with the part of it, the Sublime Press? Is John
Well,
involved with you on that?
yeah, we've published five plays so far. I can't even remember. I think four so far. John's play, My Crazy, My Love, which I had the privilege and pleasure of directing and performing in when was that? 2019? Yeah, the fall of 2019. So we've published My Crazy, My Love. We've published David Hope's wonderful play, Washington Place. We've published Mary Edith Burrell's wonderful and enormously funny solo show, hashtag Ouch, my play, American Arcade. So, and there'll be more to come. But yes, when we broke up the band with the Magnetic Theater, if you will, John and I and several of our close compatriots, including Todd Weekly, who is the director of the Cardboard Sea, which has a show opening in association with the Sublime Theater on September 1st and running the Thursday through Saturday, September 1st through the 10th, is it? Thursday through Saturday, 7:30. It's called The Cleaning Ladies, and that is, I hope people will come to see it. Tickets are available for both shows at www.thesublimetheater.org.
And wait a
But
second.
Todd
Do you
and
spell? Do you
Henry
spell?
Williamson and Christy DeVille and David Hope, these were a group of people who got together and founded the Sublime,
And when you talk about
where
the website, you spell theater the correct way. Is that it?
well, that depends think it's correct. We spell it E-R. Theater E-R.
What?
Theater.
Oh wait, I'll have to remember that because
Yeah, the
again,
Germans and most Americans would actually approve, but
well,
and the British. Let's get the French.
well,
Les French.
help me with that, John. From a teaching standpoint, so is there a correct spelling of theater?
Oh gosh. Um, Probably if you looked in the dictionary, it would say both are correct,
Right. Okay. Because
which
yeah.
is just deeply disturbing. I mean, who can tolerate ambiguity in this life?
Well,
You
no.
know?
Thanks for sharing that.
Anyway, the Sublime Theater, theater.org.
Okay.
Please visit.
And we'll also
Tickets are
talk.
cheap.
They are really, and they're bargain. Anything I will tell you, anything that Steve is involved with and John as well, you're in for a treat. And I'll also tell if I can add this based on some of the stuff, John, I've seen of yours, it will be something that's not traditional in the sense you won't see it elsewhere. Which is kind of cool. That some of John's stuff, like what was the one I mentioned that when it began with th. What was that one?
URNZ.
Yeah, I just, I haven't seen anything quite like that. So that was quite a treat to see. And anything, like I said, Steven is involved in, you'll see that's the case too. And so we'll just talk a little bit about your background. If I can ask you to condense it in what, like 30 minutes or less, if we can give the Reader's Digest version.
Do we need to know now? I
No, I'm
thought
just curious.
anybody who pays attention to Blaine knows everything about me.
Well, no, the one about Steve, so same thing too. When did you start getting in theater?
Very answer to your question about the first performance, which perhaps you've forgotten, is I played a cat, and no, I will not be reprising that role. No,
how,
no,
how,
and it
how,
wasn't in Cats.
how old were
It
you?
was way before Cats. I was 6.
Okay, that was your first
Anyway,
role.
I grew up. I mean, I also grew up doing music and writing. But yeah, I mean, I in all through junior high school and high school, in summer camp musicals, occasionally. A farce was one of my earliest straight plays. I played the lead role in Charlie's Aunt once upon a time. Yeah, then I majored in theater in college and founded my first theater company there. And had another company immediately after college, a rural theater troupe back in the day in cow country in New York, and moved to New York, had another theater company, worked with the Ridiculous Theatrical Company for extraordinary, ended up at Theater Communications Group for 8 years. Eventually, I landed at Arena Stage, as you mentioned, in DC, where I was the art for a couple of years. Then I had a long layoff. Was kind of done. Thought I was finished. A bit later, moved to Ash 2006, and very much against my will, was sort of dragged to a couple of performances, and then attend a reading of a new play. And God damn it, before I knew it, I was sucked in because I found just amazingly gifted, passionate, dedicated people. Whom, I mean, I've had an extraordinary career in a theater communications group is the National Organization for America's Not-for-Profit Theaters. So when I was working in New York at the Ridiculous Theatrical Company in the heart of Greenwich Village, I the burning hot center of American theater right there in New York City. It was extraordinary. And then sort of positioned at, in a high level overview of the entire national, traveling sometimes and seeing all kinds of people in all kinds of contexts.
Steve,
I've had amazingly broad exposure to theater, and I was dumbfounded when was going on here with all these people. And for some reason, some of them wrote, and there were a bunch of them who wanted to put on new plays. And before I knew it, we had a company.
Steve, out of all the stuff you've done, again, I'm familiar with some of it, the writing, performing, publishing, directing, all this kind of stuff. Do you have a favorite thing that you do?
Nope.
No? You like it all?
Yeah, I really do. And I don't know that. liking is the measure of what matters. Um, uh, I'm not saying I'm any good at it. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But direct and acting come pretty easily to me, naturally, and they're enormously pleasurable. Writing, funny enough, is a much, much, much harder gig. Um, it's mostly solitary work, and I have high standards that I usually don't meet. So um, I won't say I don't take pleasure in it. I do, but it's not easy. And maybe there may be some reason that I think, therefore, that's the thing that I do. But there are two things. There's large where I've been extraordinarily lucky to be able to many, many other creative people get their work done. Serving as a dramaturg, serving as a director, what have occasionally acting in their work. I've just I other people get their work done, and it's hard not to really appreciate. Writers tend not to like anybody else's writing. I mean, it's such a thing to do in the first place, and you have to gin up your ego in such a way to believe that something you're writing could ever matter to anybody. That part of what many, many writers do is they downgrade every other writer in order to begin to any value. So they tend to think, I am the greatest. There is no other poet or playwright. You know, I'm lucky enough not to feel that way. If I can get some writing done, that is great. And I hope that, some of it outlasts. But I don't know, producing, directing, acting, working, it's great.
I won't say it was my favorite Steve Samuels role, but the one I always remember, of course, is when you did a host show in a bird cage. What was that all about?
It was called The Man with the Birdcage on His Head, and it was a solo tour of my theater life. And what it was referencing was that the first time I managed to appear on the stage theatrical company where I did everything imaginable behind the scenes, but the resident genius Charles Ludlam did not me on the stage. But I did finally end up in one of his plays, well, the first of them that I did, Exquisite Torture. And I played 7 or 8 different characters, a nursing nun, but the role was a waiter with a birdcage on his head. And that's what I thought that was a funny place to situate that show.
And it's a funny thing to see a whole show with the actor wearing a birdcage the whole time. So I always remember that. John, let's kind of fast forward then to the show coming up. Steve had alluded to before. You have a show opening, and again, we'll get dates on it. Show involving you is it's
to October 1st.
October 1st to the, was it?
September 15th.
Okay. And John, I'll let you talk about it since it's a one-man show. Is that correct? You're the only guy on stage?
That's right. As was the Songs of Robert, lo, these many years ago. And this is in many ways a sequel to that original show that really, in some ways, was kind of the inaugural moment for this collaboration between Steve and myself. So the Songs of Robert. Pardon me?
I just want people to know that you do not have to have any previous knowledge or of the Songs of Robert in order to get a real kick out of Robert.
Even for
all the backstory built in.
Even for the people who saw the original show, I don't expect anyone to remember a darn thing about it. That was a long time ago. So this new play, we call it a sequel, I think more for our purposes than for anything else. And there are some characters that reappear. But the basic concept is that the lead character, the main character of the Songs of Robert. He was a teenager, a high school kid, kind of a romantic high school kid. And the play is about his discovery of himself as an artist and his leaving his hometown. That's kind of where the play ends. He's going out into the world, right? And that's it. And I had, at that point, I never imagined that there would be more to his story. It was just capturing this moment, I think, in a young person's initiation, shall we say. But then, of course, Steve and I did, a dozen other shows together. I can't even count them. So I feel like a whole life has passed. And of course, that play, The Songs of Robert, was written by a younger man. I was in my 20s when I wrote those poems, right? Now I'm over 50. So anyway, Steve and I were kind of trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel with this pandemic. We had been on hiatus. We had to cancel a show that we were in rehearsal for that I was deeply committed to, written by our dear friend Julian Voris. Steve was in the play. I had cast him. I was directing. We had to cancel. We had to pull the plug on it because of the pandemic. This was April.
We were going up,
yeah,
or 2 weeks before we were going to be in performance.
We had been rehearsing for several weeks. The show was starting to come together. Everyone was excited, and then boom, sorry, shut down. So we were discouraged, as many people I'm sure were, for a variety of reasons during that time. And this whole pandemic did not feel like an artistic retreat for me. I mean, I felt creatively rather inert. And I felt like most of my efforts were committed to just being with my family, helping my daughter with her online school and working in the garden, trying to, start a little homestead here at my house. So I was really disconnected from my art for most of that period. But then as things started loosening up, Steve and I started talking again about, how can we get the Sublime Theater? How can we reconnect to our audience? What can we do to kind of reinvent ourselves in a way? I mean, we had been busy with the publishing side of the Sublime for much of the pandemic, but we had not been performing anything, and I hadn't been writing either. Maybe Steve, you had been writing, but I had not been writing.
I've been writing fiction. I had
Okay.
no, like you, I was inert in relation to the theater.
So that was a rough time, but then Steve sort of approached me, and we talked about what kind of show could we possibly do. Well, we don't want a downer. I did have a play I had been working on prior to the pandemic, and I described it to Steve, and he said, I don't know. That sounds kind of depressing, John. I said, well, okay, yeah, maybe that's not what we want. And he actually suggested, well, what about, we're coming up on the 20-year anniversary of our collaboration. I don't know, 15 years, whatever, however many years. Why don't we, we're coming out of this phase of inertia. Why don't we reconnect to our roots somehow? Maybe there's a sequel to the Songs of Robert. Have you thought about that? I said, no, Steve, I have never thought about that. And that seems like a really absurd idea. But with his encouragement, I tried hand at it. I just sat down and started writing some speeches, and lo and behold, things started emerging rather quickly.
If I may say, it was kind of remarkable. I mean, part of what I was trying to figure out was how could I figured we needed to do something kind of small so that there weren't too many people involved, so that we might be able to rehearse it as much as possible in advance, and then when health conditions allowed for us to come back to the theater, we might be able to rehearse for a couple of weeks and then just go with it. So that was, and John hadn't been on stage for a while and kind of had a hankering, and I also knew he had a while, and somehow all of those things coalesced in my head to, hey, wait a minute, what about where's Robert now? What's going on? And was, oh my God, I can't do that. I don't write poetry anymore. That's not possible. And 3 days later,
John,
and they were good.
Yeah, it came back to me rather quickly. But what Steve's pointing out is there was, of course, a practical side to this, and of course the theater is a practical art form. We needed something small, portable, that could potentially, in an emergency, be canceled if necessary and then remounted later. And of course, if you got multiple actors and everything is lined up and the schedules are lined up and then you have to cancel, good luck finding everybody's time to come together again. So this was in a way a kind of strategic, doable project that would get us back into performing new work. But yeah, the script actually came rather quickly, and the concept is essentially we revisit Robert. He's now a middle-aged man, and he's returning to his hometown. There are a variety of reasons. I won't give them away, but I do feel like this play has a stronger plot dimension than the original play did. So there's a story here. There's a mystery. There's a question that gets answered. And I also feel that there. This is I won't go into detail here, but there are things about the original play that really couldn't be done these days. The world is different than it was in the late 90s, when I wrote it, and certainly in the early 2000s when we started performing it as a one-man show. It's a different world. We've had Donald Trump as president. We've had Black Lives Matter. We've had gender diversity becoming a major issue in our lives. I mean, all these things, have really made the world feel very different to me than it did when I was in my early 30s. So I think this return to the Songs of Robert material required a different approach and a different angle. So this new play, yes, it has some of the same characters, albeit 20 or 30 years later. But I would say the experience for the audience is going to be rather different on some level. It's still a one-man show, and there are only so many different varieties of things you can do with one actor. But in certain ways, Steve has helped me approach this material using the things we learned from the original production, but also adding some new things. And one thing that's new, of course, is that I'm no longer playing traditional songs as I did in the original show. I had some traditional old time material and some blues material that I had maybe tweaked a bit and arranged, but those songs pretty much pre-existed the show. But this material they're my compositions. It's my songs, and of course, I don't have a whole lot of experience performing my own my own songs in front of an audience, so that has required a different approach too. But so you don't have to have seen the original show. If you have seen it and you do remember some things about it, that will make this experience all the richer. But it's not necessary. I think it's going to be a freestanding thing.
Now, how many
Totally
songs?
is.
How many songs are in this?
I,
I
I
don't
can't
have the
remember
list with
exactly.
me. I feel like it's about eight,
Yeah,
maybe.
that might be right.
And
Yeah,
so
about eight. Yeah.
And he performs them. He has a banjo, is fretless, which is rather interesting. He has a gorgeous old bar that he plays, and there's a resonator guitar that also featured prominently in the original show. Uh, Uses as well. So there's a great variety, and he may not have a lot of his songs in front of people in general, but as we've been rehearsing, he's just been becoming a stronger and stronger performer of these songs, and I think they're gorgeous. And they're earworms too, which is a real test of. I mean, I just almost every morning with one or another of the songs from the show swirling in my head, and it's a different one at different times of day, and it's good stuff.
John, you mentioned the original show. There was music, I recall. Had you written any songs for that?
Well, there is actually one song in that original show that I did write for the show, but it came about in an unusual way. It was originally a long monologue, kind of Robert's final monologue in that show. And then I added music and I made it kind of a Sprechgesang, a sort of speaking singing, right? So yes, I sing, but I'm really just reciting at a rather, robust clip, the monologue, but playing music to it. So it's kind of a halfway thing between a song and a poem. But the other songs in that original show really are traditional blues and or country blues and or old time, traditional Appalachian songs. And I played the banjo and I played this resonator guitar that Steve mentioned. But I'm a little bit self-conscious about these things now because my brother-in-law is a man named Holiday Childress, who
Oh,
is a virtuoso musician. You probably know him, Blaine.
yeah,
He's a local
you
guy.
helped me get him. He was on. I interviewed him
Okay, very
about a year
good.
ago.
Yeah,
Good
and
guy.
he's the kind of human being who can make a guitar do anything he wants it to do, and he can make his voice do anything he wants it to do. So, I mean, his gifts are in a different league. And so I'm a little bit nervous to do my, rather well, let's just say workable songs in front of an audience in which he would be sitting. But I have other musician friends in town who are just extremely accomplished performers. And so this is going to be going a bit out on a limb for me, but that makes it exciting. And certainly Steve's help in helping, I suppose, helping me perform these songs in character. That is going to be, I think, key to their success. If I were just standing up there as John Crutchfield and trying to perform, I mean, I don't know if that I could do that.
Well,
That makes sense.
the thing has me looking forward to it. I'm thinking that I want to make sure I say this because then this will be uh, Robert Returns, and so I wonder what's going to happen in 20 or 30 years from now. Then we get the third and final
Yeah,
Robert, whatever we call it, but something
yeah,
to
I've
look
got to.
forward to.
Never say never.
Exactly, is this something that'll happen? See, to recap a little bit, let's talk about if folks want to see then this show. If you would first of all repeat the dates on that, and we'll go back to the other show as
Well,
well.
I've got two shows I'm touting at the
Well,
moment.
let's do the first one.
One
Let's
is
just talk about let's
the
just
cardboard seas
let's just talk about John's show first.
September 1st to
Okay.
10th. You're not going to stop me, Blaine. September 1st to September 10th. And John's show, Robert Returns, is September 15th to October 1st. So that's all Thursdays through 7:30 p.m. at the Bebe Theatre at 20 Commerce Street in downtown Asheville. And we strongly recommend getting tickets online, www.thesublimetheater.org.
And before, since you already mentioned it, I have to then go back to it. So the show coming up, um, just a few days. What's that show all about?
Well, you'd have to know the cardboard make any sense to you, but they are an extraordinary troupe, wonderful actors. Todd Weekley's a great director, and his long-term collaborator Jeff Donnelly does a spectacular job. And this show, The Cleaning Ladies, is modern fantasia involving Marie Antoinette and the Gorgon Medusa, who are kind of trapped in a hell working as cleaning ladies at a Days Inn somewhere in Florida, and they're trying to beat the devil and escape to a world of. That's all I know. I haven't seen it. I haven't
Oh,
read it,
okay.
but I have such faith in the cardboard sea. No. Speaking of a company whose work is nothing like you've seen before, you've seen a production by the Cardboard Sea. You haven't seen anything like this.
Okay. That's the upcoming show. And then the dates for John's show are what again?
September 1st, Thursdays through Saturdays, 7:30 p.m. The BB Theater, downtown Asheville. www.thesblimetheater.org.
And as Steve said, I will encourage folks to get tickets early because Bebe Theatre is not a real big theater.
And we're not selling all of the seats because some people don't seem to know this, but the pandemic and the BB is a small theater, so we have only the limited number of seats available, and people are required to wear masks on. And we'll keep him at a little distance from the audience just for that reason. But people's health is at stake, and we just don't want to have anything to do with anybody getting sick.
And John, a final question if I can. So after the run of this show, do you have anything upcoming aside from finishing your semester of teaching? Any other creative projects in mind or you'll be working on afterward?
Well, interestingly enough, the whole experience of getting back into writing on this project got me stimulated writing poems again. So I've actually been working on some poems I have a manuscript I've been shopping around. No luck so far getting it, taken at a press or I guess the way frequently poetry manuscripts get published these days is through a contest. You win a contest at one of these small poetry publishers. So no luck so far, but that just means, I'll be experimenting, switching out poems, tinkering, revising, maybe writing some new ones. I've got some material in my notebooks I'm going to be working on. But frankly, Blaine, I mean, during the semester, I have very little time for much else. Also, I have two small kids who are in school, so I've learned to not raise my hopes too high for what I can accomplish during the semester. In fact, right now, we're 2 weeks in to the semester, actually starting now. We're in our third week, and we had originally hoped to do this show over the summer so that I wouldn't be in this situation. But for various reasons, that wasn't possible. So here I am really, trying to rehearse and uh, do a semi-decent job as a teacher and not be a terrible dad. And those things are rather demanding. So it's going to be a while before I have a new project, but also, it's the nature of our company that we tend to kind of take turns committing or claiming resources for a production. So I don't imagine it'll be my turn again for another year at least. I want to see what Steve has in his back pocket. I know he's been working on a play. I still would love to reconnect with Julian Voris. He's the author of the play that we had been working on before the pandemic. He's just an amazing writer and a wonderful person to work with. I would love to see if we could do something by him, maybe not the same show that we had been working on before. So it's possible that my own writerly contributions won't come down the pike until some time has passed. But there'll be other things the Sublime can do. I mean, if Steve has a show, we'd want to do that, and certainly if Julian has something, so we'll have to see.
There are
Okay.
plenty of
And,
possibilities with David Hope's scripts, which I'm hoping we'll be able to get to. Always want to have Henry Williamson direct, but he has a new baby, so I don't know. That might be a little while for him. I don't know whether the How To crew is going to be returning. It's going to be up to them, of course. That's a troupe that does what we call sketch of sketch and sketch comedy. Various how-to titles have been very successful and a lot of fun. Uh, don't know. Yeah, we're going to be gathering the truth once we get, theater is actually having a pretty hard time because of the pandemic, and it's completely understandable. But nationwide and here in Asheville, ticket sales are off, and so it's tough. It's no one's to blame. It's just an odd moment that we have to get through doing these two shows as an investment in the future. I don't even expect to break even on them, but you can hope. But we're going to get through these couple of productions and going to gather the troops and talking about what we really can do going forward. Who's got stuff and who's ready to go.
well, anyway, I'd like to do two things. First of all, I'd like to thank both of you guys for joining me on this Blaine's World
Thank you, Brian.
podcast. I'd also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, for helping out. And lastly, just to remind the both of you, when you have that next project off the ground, Steve, which you always do, and John, when you have the poetry ready, I'd love to do a show on that as well when you finish that. So anyway, guys, thanks a lot, and I'll look forward to seeing you. And now I have a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I have 3 weeks to see it. That's the plan to at least get there for one of the shows. So looking forward to it, guys. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Blaine. It's a pleasure.